With Max Verstappen securing his second world championship, Lewis Hamilton's career looks to be fading, but the seven-time world champion has claimed that he has no intention of retiring soon and has big plans for the future. Plus, he has criticized the FIA and said they need to be tough on the budget cap regulations. But how much would last year's championship have actually changed anyway? Stay tuned. First, Red Bull overspending. It's always hard to accept defeat, especially if you were Mercedes last season. The entire championship came down to a few controversial decisions in the final race of the year, but it's what has been revealed about what was going on in the background that has made the loss even harder. There's much more to Formula One than what you see on the track. A team of engineers, designers, strategists, and personnel all keep the wheels turning in each garage. And with the new budget restrictions, all of that gobbles up precious money. Toto Wolff was open this year about how it was difficult for Mercedes to change direction with this year's model, despite making big mistakes in their design philosophy. The $140 million limit for spending has put a hamper on testing, developing, and upgrading the car throughout the season. That's why Mercedes were concerned about reports that Red Bull were being investigated for breaching the financial regulations. Wolff and Hamilton both estimated that any breach would have been a major advantage. The FIA eventually confirmed that Red Bull had been found guilty of overspending, but it was considered a minor breach, meaning it was less than 5% of the budget cap. When the F1's managing director of motorsport, Ross Brawn, introduced the restrictions in 2019, he said that there would be serious consequences for breaking the rules, but Red Bull will likely be handed a fine rather than deducted any points from the 2021 championship. For the defending world champions, it's a small price to pay. Next, Verstappen is just too good. Even if Red Bull hadn't overspent, how likely is it that Lewis Hamilton would have come out on top? Some think that Hamilton might be surprised by the result. Button has compared Max Verstappen's dominance to another young Red Bull driver, Sebastian Vettel. The German prodigy blew the competition out of the water and went on to win 4 consecutive world championships with the team. Verstappen's impact has also been likened to 7-time world champion Michael Schumacher. Former driver Johnny Herbert has said that Verstappen has been able to mold the whole team around him. That makes him not just the #1 driver in the team, but the sole focus of development and design. In fact, Red Bull and legendary designer Adrian Newey have been criticized for adapting their car to Verstappen's driving style too much. That's one theory behind why partners of Verstappen like Alex Albon or Pierre Gasly don't tend to do well in Red Bull's second seat. Red Bull chief Christian Horner has been open about Verstappen being their best chance of championship success, and so far, that has proven to be right. He leads his teammate Sergio Perez by more than 100 points, much as he did in last year's season. The question is not really, do Red Bull prefer Verstappen, but just how much? With the newly crowned 2-time world champion set to drive for the team until 2028, Johnny Herbert might be right. We might be looking at a Schumacher-style era of Formula One. How much of an advantage was Red Bull spending? The 5% allowance in the financial regulations are hard to quantify, but other team principals have had their say. During the Japanese Grand Prix weekend, where Max Verstappen clinched this year's title, Ferrari boss Matteo Binotto explained how big of an impact extra spending could have. He estimated that $5 million translates into around half a second of pace advantage, and that $1 million could trim 1 or 2 tenths off a car's lap time. In a sport that runs on milliseconds, that could have been a deciding difference in winning pole position or having an edge over a rival. Lewis Hamilton has made similar statements. Mercedes introduced their last big upgrade last season at the British Grand Prix, while Red Bull had 4 more. He went further to estimate that if Mercedes had spent $300,000 on a new floor or wing, it could have changed the outcome of the championship. But that's not all. It's not only last year's performance that is under question now. Matteo Binotto also talked about the longer-term consequences of overspending. Talking about the FIA's investigation, he said, "Obviously it's about 2021, and from 2021, it's an advantage you gain over the following seasons." Binotto is clearly concerned that any advantage Red Bull gained last season might have been their secret to coming out strong this year, where they have blown Ferrari out of the water. Ferrari have made their fair share of strategic blunders to hand some wins to Red Bull, but earlier in the season, Binotto was questioning how his rivals were able to keep up with constant upgrades. Now, we might have the answer. Up next, why does the FIA's recent decision make last year's championship even harder for Hamilton to accept? And how are Mercedes planning to get back on top in 2023? So don't go anywhere. Next, FIA need to be strict. Before the FIA had even released their official statement, there were plenty of whispers in the paddock about Red Bull overspending. While Red Bull chief Christian Horner was busy denying the allegations and threatening legal action, others were already thinking about how they should be penalized. polarized, and Lewis Hamilton was leading the charge in pushing the FIA to be tough. Hamilton said there was a need for transparency to maintain the integrity of the sport. At the same time, though, Hamilton said that he held a lot of trust in the FIA's new president, Mohammed Ben Sulayem, in leading the sport. When Max Verstappen was asked about the potential breach, he replied that it was up to the FIA to decide, and he was just focused on driving. Since the FIA's findings were released, Hamilton hasn't commented on them yet. The FIA are still judging what the appropriate penalty will be, but there's no doubt Max Verstappen will be keeping his championship. The Dutchman was able to beat Hamilton by just 8 points in a nail-biting back-and-forth season. Some have argued that Red Bull's budget breach will make it even more difficult for Mercedes to accept the result. It adds another point of debate to a season that was already one of the most controversial of all time. Hamilton and Verstappen supporters will probably be arguing for the rest of time. Next up, Mercedes' 2023 plans. It's safe to say that it hasn't been smooth sailing for Mercedes this season. After 7 years of dominance in the turbo hybrid era, everyone was expecting the Silver Arrows to set the benchmark under the new regulations. But an ambitious no-side pod concept didn't end up paying off, causing the defending Constructors' champions to drop to third in the standings, out of sight from the leaders Red Bull and Ferrari. But as 2022 comes to a close, Lewis Hamilton is feeling optimistic about the future of the team. He said that Mercedes finally understand the weaknesses of their car and that Hamilton could be fighting for race wins as early as next season. At this point, all teams are already heavily focused on next year's model, but Mercedes technical director Mike Elliott has cautioned against Hamilton's high hopes. Elliott said that it is difficult to predict exactly how competitive their car will be next season, but he did say that if the team worked hard over the winter, they might be back at the top. But is it too late for Lewis Hamilton? Mercedes will continue to move forward with or without Lewis Hamilton. After George Russell's outstanding debut season with the team and a healthy stock of young drivers under Mercedes' wing, the future is bright, but Hamilton has made clear that he's not going anywhere just yet. Toto Wolff told the media that his discussions with Hamilton about his future had been open and positive. Hamilton apparently confirmed that he was considering driving for the next 5 years and that leaving Mercedes wasn't an option. The 7-time world champion said, "We still have a lot of work to do, a lot to achieve still. I plan on staying with Mercedes for the rest of my life. That's definite." But it's not just his on-track racing that Hamilton is focusing on. He also has plenty of things outside the track that he is working on, including film producing, charity work, and helping change the direction of the sport. He said that there is still a lot of work to be done in Formula One to create a more open and inclusive environment. Hamilton has been an outspoken promoter of increasing opportunities for minorities in motorsport, a project that he pioneers through his nonprofit, Mission 44. Unlike Hamilton's longtime rival Sebastian Vettel, who announced his retirement earlier this year, Hamilton doesn't plan on leaving. The two led the battle between Mercedes and Ferrari for years and have since become close friends. And at the Japanese Grand Prix, Hamilton said that he hopes Vettel returns to the sport after taking some time off. Do you think that Lewis Hamilton will ever win an 8th world championship, or is it time for him to call it quits? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in the next one.